Chapter 1. Lord Caspian's Divorce. Snowflakes fell gently from the sky and landed on the vast lands bordering Diatoran. 1,000,000 soldiers were in an orderly formation, separated into groups by the thousands. Undaunted by the bitter cold, the huge army standing on the snowy hills of Diatoran's border stretched as far as the eye could see. Even if the fierce winds raged and a snowstorm brewed, the magnificent sight of the army gathered together was not diminished. The soldiers were filled with zeal and determination that reached the heavens. This army of 1,000,000 elite troops was none other than Diadem Hall's finest soldiers. 5 years ago, the soldiers of Diadem Hall had been fighting relentlessly at the borders of Diatoran. They defeated their enemies and achieved remarkable feats. The neighboring nations, who were enemies of Diatoran, had no chance against them. They were undefeated on the battlefield, and no stronghold could stand against their attacks. The mere mention of their army was enough to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. Until today, Diadem Hall was in charge of securing the safety of Diatoran's borders. The mighty army had no rivals and ruled supreme. Their reputation spread far and wide throughout the world. At that moment, a commanding voice rang out and echoed in the skies. Diadem Hall cannot continue without Lord Caspian. The borders of Diatoran need Lord Caspian. His men cannot live without Lord Caspian. It was a rallying cry that pierced the cold winds and reverberated in the ears of 1,000,000 warriors that stood in the snow. All hail Lord Caspian! All hail Lord Caspian! All hail Lord Caspian! The voices of 1,000,000 soldiers shouting in unison resounded throughout the air. Even the heavy clouds in the sky were dispersed by the tremendous roar of the army. A year ago, several neighboring nations and powerful families set up an elaborate trap in the mountains of Algard. Their goal was to ambush the Lord of Diadem Hall, Caspian Lynch. Caspian engaged in a battle to the death with the forces of these nations and emerged victorious. He slaughtered the rulers of those enemy nations and the leaders of influential families. He hung their lifeless bodies on the highest peak of the Algard Mountains. His cruelty sent shockwaves throughout the earth. Diadem Hall seized this opportunity and eliminated all the remaining invaders at the border. Caspian achieved the unity of Diatoran's territories, restoring peace to all 35,000 miles of the country's border. After the battle ended, Caspian disappeared without a trace. Half a year ago, Caspian had sent a message to his generals. He stated that since there was no conflict occurring at the borders, he decided to get married and live a simple life for some time. If the border remained peaceful, they were to not disturb his sabbatical at South Lake City, after taking a year off to recuperate. The enemies of neighboring nations were starting to stir up trouble by increasing the number of their troops at the borders. To the soldiers at Diadem Hall, Caspian was their only leader. He was the undefeated king of the battlefield, Lord Caspian. Diatoran could not exist without a king. Similarly, Diadem Hall could not be without Lord Caspian. Hawkeye fighter jets streaked across the sky, flying at high speeds towards South Lake City. They had only one mission. It was to welcome back Lord Caspian. Meanwhile, there was a dramatic breakup unfolding inside a rental house in South Lake City, within the borders of Diatoran. Caspian, let's get a divorce. Coincidentally, it was Caspian's 23rd birthday soon. He never expected that Melanie Hudson would choose this day specifically to ask for a divorce. She seemed to be constantly picking fights with him over trivial issues. Nonetheless, Caspian had always believed that the relationship between him and Melanie was true love. He was completely caught off guard. Caspian never imagined that he would receive news of the divorce as his gift on the night before his 23rd birthday. Caspian stood in the living room, stunned. Melanie could just be in a bad mood. He thought that she was deliberately taking out her anger on him and tried to comfort her. Melanie, it's my 23rd birthday tomorrow. I plan to give you a special gift on my birthday. There's no need. Before Caspian could finish speaking, Melanie waved him away with a weary expression on her face. I don't want you to work so hard for my sake. You work a day job at the company and deliver parcels around the building complex during lunch break. I can't accept the gift you bought me with your hard-earned money. You're working too hard every day. When Caspian heard Melanie's words, he thought that there was a chance to turn things around. Staring at Melanie, He spoke urgently. "Melanie, I'm not tired. You deserve the best from me. I am willing to give you everything, no matter how tough or exhausted I am. Have you ever thought about me? I'm not willing to put up with you. Don't you know that? I've had enough." Melanie could not control her emotions any longer. She stood up with an annoyed expression on her face and interrupted Caspian before he could continue. "I'm unwilling to smell the odor of sweat on your body every day. I don't want to hear my colleagues at the office gossip in front of me, saying that my husband delivered her parcel during lunch break. I've had enough of taking the crowded bus and trying to avoid getting groped by lewd men every day. After work, I want to go out and have some fun. I want to enjoy a candlelit dinner and the sights in the city. I want to sit in a luxurious car and wear glamorous clothes that will make my colleagues jealous. Don't you know any of this?" Caspian had thought that he found love in the real world after returning from the borders of Diatorin. He planned to reveal his identity to Melanie on his 23rd birthday. He would make her the happiest woman in the world. He never expected to find out that Melanie actually despised the odor of sweat from his body. In her own words, the sweat from working hard at his job to provide for her was nauseating and disgusting. Nonetheless, Caspian was reluctant to give up on the love they had shared over the past year. He told her sincerely, "Everything you requested, I am going to give to you when tomorrow comes. Melanie, please believe me. What I can provide you will be much more than what you can imagine." Sighing, Melanie said with resignation, "Caspian, I'm exhausted. You're just a poor chap without money, power, or assets. What can you give me? Let's put an end to this. Bring your marriage certificate, and we shall go get a divorce tomorrow." After she finished speaking, she went into the bedroom with a stony face. Caspian heard the sound of the bedroom door being locked from the inside. He stared blankly at their wedding photos hanging in the living room. Turning to the locked door of their bedroom, Caspian couldn't help but sigh. In the end, the true love that he prided himself on finding finally succumbed to money problems. Melanie, the wife that he had chosen, was only 2 hours away from getting everything she ever wanted. Alas, she destroyed her future with her own hands. Caspian sat on the couch for almost half an hour, lost in thought. It seemed he wouldn't be able to sleep in the bedroom tonight. He would have to make do on the couch. At this moment, the bedroom door opened once more. Melanie's beautiful but stony face appeared behind it. Caspian felt a glimmer of hope. He thought that Melanie might still feel reluctant to end their marriage. The next moment, a pink heart-shaped box was thrown at Caspian's feet. This was the present that he had prepared for Melanie. He placed it on her bedside table as a surprise. However, Melanie treated his present like trash and discarded it heartlessly. Caspian bent down and picked the box up, shaking his head with a bitter smile. He asked Melanie one last time, "Don't you want to see what is inside this box?" "There's no need. I have enough cheap presents that reek of your sweat." After Melanie finished speaking, she locked the bedroom door from the inside once again. Caspian sat back on the couch. Shaking his head, he sighed heavily and opened the heart-shaped box that Melanie had just thrown at him like garbage. Inside the box, there was a card made of pure gold and a bulky, old-fashioned cell phone. The gold card was specially crafted by Rias Bank for very important person customers. The account number of the card was 88. The gold card could be used anywhere in the world with no spending limit. You could buy anything you dreamed of with this card in hand. There were only 8 people in the world who possessed this precious card. Many tycoons and top billionaires didn't even know of the card's existence. It was not because they wouldn't want to have it, but they were simply unqualified. They weren't even worthy to know about it. On the other hand, the old cell phone looked plain. It seemed even more bulkier than the discontinued Nokia cell phones of the past. It appeared to be a cheap knockoff produced from a low-end workshop. There wasn't even a logo printed on the cell phone. However, this unassuming phone was equipped with the world-leading Diamond System software, created by Diadem Hall for their own use. The system would only be activated by facial recognition. Only members of the Diadem Hall were allowed access to Diamond Systems. Once Caspian unlocked his phone with facial recognition, numerous text messages flooded into the phone. Most of the messages were similar and sent at midnight. They were all wishing Lord Caspian a happy 23rd birthday. Just then, the phone rang. It was a call from Sylvia Frost, Lord Caspian's personal assistant. Lord Caspian, happy birthday. We will celebrate your birthday at dawn. Besides reporting on the situation at the border, we will finally meet your wife too. We brought the largest remaining night pearl, the precious lotus herb from Algard Mountains, and a bunch of other presents for our first meeting. These are all tokens of loyalty from your subordinates. However, Caspian replied, Sylvia, I'm getting a divorce. Why? You ask. It's because Melanie thinks that I have no money and power. Chapter 2. Ex-husband. Early the next morning, Caspian and Melanie stood in front of the entrance of their run-down apartment building where they lived. They waited for the bus by the road. Caspian gave Melanie one last chance and asked, Are you sure you don't want to reconsider? Without even looking at him, Melanie replied, There's no need. As she finished speaking, her phone started ringing from inside her new Gucci bag. Melanie fished out her brand new iPhone. When she saw the caller ID on the screen, she walked over to a nearby sycamore tree. She answered the call in a gentle tone. A few months ago, Melanie had spoken to Caspian in such a sweet voice as well. However, her favor now belonged to another man who was on the other end of the call. Once Caspian was certain that their relationship was over, he didn't waste time trying to change her mind. The bus arrived after a while. When the doors opened, Caspian gestured to Melanie, who had just finished her call, to get on the bus. Melanie walked over to the bus and glanced at Caspian. There was a hint of disdain and mockery in her gaze, as she stared at Caspian with pity. A few months ago, we took the bus to register our marriage. Today, we are also taking the bus to divorce each other. Remember, this is the reason for our divorce. The third stop of the bus route was at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Both of them sat in different rows without speaking a word, right behind each other. Afterward, they arrived at the counter for divorce proceedings at the Civil Affairs Bureau. The staff invited them to sit down and ask for their documents. As the staff member checked their documents, he asked the both of them, Have you two considered this thoroughly and divided your joint assets? Melanie couldn't wait to respond. We have thought this true. Please settle the proceedings quickly. We don't have many assets. We live in a rental house and we can't afford a car. The items in the room are all we have. Some were bought by me and some by him. I'm leaving everything to him. We also have a small amount in the bank account which I will leave to him as well. It's probably around $180. I don't want anything. Although she sounded like a generous person, her look of disdain clearly showed that she thought of it as charity to her ex-husband. Caspian sensed an urgency in her tone. The staff member finally stamped their divorce certificates. After that, he handed them to Caspian and Melanie respectively. When they registered for marriage, they had to queue up and verify their documents to complete the proceedings. It took them around half an hour. On the other hand, getting divorced was much quicker. In less than 10 minutes, both of them walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Caspian looked up at the sky and turned to Melanie with a smile. Melanie, even though we are divorced now, can we still be friends? Melanie didn't even make eye contact with Caspian. She stuffed the divorce certificate into her bag and casually touched up her makeup with a small mirror. It's better if we treat each other like strangers in the future. When I look at you, I am reminded of the time I lived in poverty. The 6 months of our marriage felt like a nightmare to me. Now that the nightmare is over, I feel so relieved. Caspian was taken aback. He never thought that the woman he did his best to love for the past 6 months would describe their time together as a nightmare. In that instant, any lingering feelings he felt for Melanie disappeared completely. At that moment, the revving sounds of a sports car approaching could be heard. A red BMW sports car pulled up next to Melanie. The next second, the car door opened. A one-eyed man with pockmarked skin and balding hair stepped out of the car. Caspian recognized this man. He was Bobby Mason, the son of their company's general manager. Bobby was born with only one eye. Although he was ugly, he had a decent family background. His career was mediocre at best. He had to rely on his dad's connections to get to where he was currently. Thus, he remained unmarried for years. When Bobby got out of the car, He walked over to Caspian. He grabbed Caspian's hand and exclaimed with a smug expression, "Although you didn't do much, thank you so much for taking care of my wife for the past 6 months. From now on, she's my woman. I'll definitely do my best to take care of Melanie, don't worry. When she's my wife, I will not let her take public transportation nor do any house chores. I'll do my best to give her the best life I can afford. I'll definitely make her happier than ever before. Dear ex-husband, don't worry about her." Bobby's cheeky words of gratitude toward Caspian did not mask the mocking tone in his voice. At the same time, he flaunted his wealth. Caspian ignored him but stared at Melanie with surprise and curiosity. In his mind, he thought that Melanie could do much better. She should have found a younger, richer, and more successful man than him. Who would have thought that Melanie only wanted a rich man? Except for being richer than him on the surface, Bobby's physical appearance was utterly repulsive. Caspian asked her, "Did you divorce me because of him?" Melanie hung her head as her cheeks turned red with embarrassment. In the next moment, she mustered her courage and looked up. She shouted, "Yes. I divorced you because of Bobby. Bobby has been good to me and will give me a better life. He genuinely cares for me. I'm not a materialistic woman. Bobby is kind to me. He is also willing to spend time to keep me company. In my eyes, that makes him far superior in comparison to you." Perhaps only by shouting that Melanie could convince herself that she wasn't a gold digger. She was clearly trying to hide her feelings of shame toward Caspian. "Caspian, I know you loved Melanie. That's why you let her go. Men should be open-minded. Competent men like me must do their best to take care of the woman they love, while incompetent men should let them go. For example, you let Melanie go and allowed her to pursue happiness." As Bobby spoke, he nodded condescendingly at Caspian. "There is a kind of love called letting go. You've done well." Caspian chose to ignore Bobby and turn to Melanie. He had a look of disappointment on his face. "Did you abandon me for this handicapped man? You've really disappointed me." Caspian's words hit a nerve with Melanie. Melanie couldn't care less about her image and screamed hysterically on the spot. "How dare you call my husband a handicapped man? He drives a BMW. How about you? You take the bus every day. He earns tens of thousands of dollars each month, and his father is a manager of the company. How about you? You work a day job and deliver parcels in the afternoon. You come home every day covered in sweat, but you only make $5,000 a month. What do your parents do? They must be living in a remote village, I guess. We have been married for half a year, but you won't even let them meet me. Are you concerned that they would lose their way in the city, or are you afraid that I will look down on them? If you have the nerve to call Bobby a handicap, why don't you take a good look at yourself first? You're worse than trash. Even if you scrimped and saved all your life, you can't even afford to buy a car, let alone a BMW sports car. Caspian, accept your fate. You're just a poor loser." After giving Caspian a piece of her mind, Melanie turned to Bobby and took his arm. She spoke to him in a sweet voice, "Darling, let's go." Bobby was still grinning widely. "Melanie, how can you call him a poor loser? You are right about that, though. We should stay away from beggars like him in the future." In Caspian's eyes, the two shameless individuals yapping away in front of him deserved each other. As the couple walked toward the red BMW, a powerful rumble of an engine could be heard in the distance. The next moment, a huge Mercedes-Benz SUV roared by without pulling on the brakes. It ran over the red BMW sports car that Melanie was so proud of and flattened it into scrap metal. The once stylish sports car now resembled a deflated balloon. Bobby and Melanie stood on the sidewalk, completely bewildered. The Mercedes-Benz was a modified SUV. It had a length of 20 feet, weighed 3 tons, and was powered by a 6.2-liter turbo engine. This ferocious beast of a car cost approximately around $6 million. The Mercedes-Benz SUV drove over the sports car several times until it was flattened into a sheet of scrap metal. Finally, the SUV's engine was turned off, and the car door opened. A pair of long legs clad in silk stockings stepped out. The woman who emerged from the car was wearing a camo dress that clung to her shapely figure. Earlier, Bobby was furious at the brainless driver in the Mercedes-Benz SUV for running over his beloved sports car. However, he couldn't pull his eyes away when he saw the curvaceous woman stepping out of the driver's seat. Bobby swallowed hard to control his desires. To his disappointment, the woman in the camo dress ignored him completely and strode toward Caspian gracefully. "Good morning, Lord," Sylvia started to greet Caspian, but he shook his head. He gestured to her so that she would not reveal their identities. "Sylvia, why are you here?" Sylvia nodded with a smile. Suddenly, she stretched out her hand and linked arms with Caspian. Her actions caught Caspian off guard. Sylvia lifted her chin disdainfully. With a mocking smile, she sized up Bobby and Melanie, who were standing opposite them. "Caspian, I've seen your wedding photos and I know she's Melanie. However, who's the hideous ogre standing beside her?" Hideous ogre. Chapter 3, Burning of the Luxurious Goods. A moment earlier, Bobby was still captivated by Sylvia's beautiful features and shapely curves. After hearing her sarcastic words, Bobby suddenly became furious. He glanced at his beloved car, which was now crushed like a deflated balloon. Bobby couldn't help feeling angry and ashamed. He was about to lose his temper when he saw Sylvia striding toward him. Her legs were slender and smooth. It was not an exaggeration to say that Bobby had never seen such a beauty as Sylvia before. He couldn't tear his eyes away from her seductive body. In a daze, he stared blankly at Sylvia as she approached him. His mouth fell open, and he almost drooled at the sight. Sylvia went up to him with a smile, but her words and gaze were menacing. "If you keep staring at me like that, I'll gouge your eyes out and feed them to my dogs, understand?" Although Sylvia said this with a smile, Bobby felt a chill run down his spine inexplicably. Sylvia's words seemed to carry weight, and she spoke with an authoritative air. Bobby quickly averted his gaze. Turning away from Bobby, Sylvia walked up to Melanie instead. She stretched out a finger and lifted Melanie's chin in a teasing manner. Sylvia scrutinized Melanie's features and chuckled coldly. Her eyes were full of disdain and mockery as she said, "My brother told me that you're a beautiful, yet kind woman. He said it was rare to find a woman like that in this world. That was why he married you within half a year after getting to know you." She continued, "Don't you know that my brother has pushed back so many important matters for your sake? You've only been married for half a year, and yet you're in such a hurry to get a divorce. How can you be so heartless?" Melanie couldn't understand what Sylvia was talking about, but she didn't like the way Sylvia held her chin. Instinctively, Melanie tried to take a step back from her. Before she could even move, Sylvia raised her hand and gave Melanie a heavy slap on her cheek without hesitation. "You ungrateful woman. Don't you know how many women in this world would die to marry my brother? It's your good fortune to have married Caspian. However, you didn't appreciate this marriage and complained about him being poor. While you were married, you were fooling around with other men in secret. You must be tired of living." After Sylvia finished speaking, she reached out and clamped her hands on Melanie's neck. Lord Caspian of Diatorin was a legendary figure, with a reputation that preceded him. On her way here, Sylvia had decided to take Melanie's life on the spot to avenge Lord Caspian for the humiliation he had suffered. After all, ending the life of a worthless woman like Melanie wouldn't cause any trouble for Sylvia. A gold digger who dared to spurn Lord Caspian himself would be eliminated by the people of Diadem Hall. As Sylvia increased the force of her grip, a hand suddenly held her wrist. It was Caspian. He shook his head and stopped Sylvia from killing Melanie. Sylvia released her grip. Without any warning, she landed another resounding slap on Melanie's face. "Caspian is being generous and spared your wretched life. In my case, I'm not as forgiving as he is. Didn't you complain that my brother is poor? Well, now I'll show you just how much money my brother really has." With that, Sylvia went over to the heavily modified Mercedes-Benz SUV. She retrieved a beautifully packaged box from the trunk and threw it at Melanie's feet. The box was filled to the brim with more than 20 limited edition handbags. They were from luxury brands like Hermes, Louis Vuitton, Gucci, and Chanel. Melanie went bag shopping at luxury stores frequently. Thus, it was not a difficult task for her to discern the authenticity of these products. I had prepared these bags for you as a gift since dawn. These are all custom-made designs for very important person clients. Each bag is the only one of its kind in the world. I'd like to ask you, Melanie, do you think you're worthy of these handbags? After that, Sylvia went to the trunk again and brought out a box of high-end perfumes. From their packaging and design, these perfumes were clearly customized fragrances that were exclusive to very important person customers. Sylvia took a few bottles randomly. The cost of those perfumes was on par with the value of Bobby's BMW sports car. She opened the packaging without hesitation and poured the fragrant liquid all over the two boxes. After that, she took out a lighter made out of copper and lit it up. She casually tossed the lighter on the boxes. When the alcohol from the perfume was ignited, the boxes exploded and sent flames shooting into the air. Bobby and Melanie were frightened and stepped backward. When Sylvia saw Melanie's reaction, she sneered. At least you have some self-awareness. You realize that you're not worthy of these precious items. She walked over to her massive Mercedes-Benz SUV and patted the hood affectionately. Sylvia turned to Melanie and said, "This is the latest Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, the G63. Normally, it is priced at $5 million. In addition, with the personalized modifications added to the SUV from the Mercedes-Benz factory, it's worth more than $10 million. She continued, "Besides, it's not something anyone with money can buy. It is custom made by the Mercedes-Benz factory. All around the world, there are probably less than 10 buyers who are qualified to get customized cars." Sylvia stepped away from the SUV and approached Melanie with a sneer. "Do you feel regretful now? I heard that you threw away the present my brother prepared for you last night. Did you know what was inside that box? It was a custom gold card from Rias Bank. You probably don't even know what a custom gold card from Rias Bank is or what it entails. Don't worry, I'll explain it to you slowly." "That's enough, Sylvia. Let's go," Caspian interrupted Sylvia. He wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. At any rate, his relationship with Melanie had run its course, and he had nothing else to say to her. However, Sylvia did not obey Caspian's command this time. With a sweet smile, she said, "Even though Caspian didn't want me to say this, I still have to tell you what you missed out on. Owning a custom gold card by Rias Bank allows you to spend money infinitely. Your descendants could buy everything they wanted, and it would still be too much for them to spend it all." Sylvia continued, "Every year, $100 million would be deposited into the account of this gold card for your spending pleasure. The owner of this card is the man whom you just abandoned. It's Caspian, whom you deemed to be worthless and poor. Melanie, I really can't figure it out. Are you that blind to have abandoned my brother and chosen to be with this loser instead? You are truly the most baffling person I've ever seen in my life." Chapter 4. A Flea's Mockery. After Sylvia gave Melanie a good dressing down, she went over to Caspian's side. She reached out and linked her arm with Caspian's, whispering, "Lord Caspian, how did I do?" Caspian nodded and walked alongside Sylvia to the SUV. Melanie had always thought that Caspian couldn't drive. At that moment, she realized that Caspian not only knew how to drive, but he had excellent skills. She stared after the Mercedes-Benz SUV as it sped away, the engine's roar fading. After standing dumbstruck for some time, Melanie grabbed Bobby's arm. He was also in a daze. She said to him, "Bobby, Caspian must be acting, right? He must have spent all his savings to employ a beautiful actress and rent a luxurious car to put on a show. He wanted to change my mind so that I would go back to him. Isn't that right?" Bobby was confused by Caspian and everything that had happened. After listening to Melanie's assumptions, he suddenly had an epiphany. "Melanie, you're right. I remembered that there is a domestic car brand that makes SUVs that look a lot like the Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. Changing the logo would easily fool someone. As for those luxury handbags, we only saw the packaging before that woman burnt them all up. There might have been nothing of value inside." Melanie and Bobby reached a conclusion. She nodded. "I agree with you, Bobby. Those bags must have been fake. Or else, she wouldn't have set them on fire so casually. I frequent those luxury stores, so I would have known whether they were authentic at first glance. She must have been afraid that I would find out. That was why she deliberately set them on fire in front of me. They had been taken in by Sylvia's bossy demeanor and commanding tone earlier. After they mulled over it, both of them were convinced that she was just an actress hired by Caspian. Melanie thought that she had seen through Caspian's little charade that he orchestrated. She was relieved that she suppressed the urge to get back together with Caspian. It was a good thing she did not fall for his tricks. When Sylvia was mocking her just now, Melanie almost threw herself into Caspian's arms, pleading for them to return to the past. At this moment, Melanie wrapped her arm around Bobby's with a sense of triumph. She could already envision her ideal life in the near future. As a socialite of the upper class, she would go around in sports cars. She would have countless designer bags and luxury clothing items in her wardrobe. On the other hand, Bobby was in a foul mood. His beloved car was flattened to a sheet of scrap metal. Caspian drove the car to the entrance of his company and had Sylvia take the wheel. On the way, Sylvia reported to Caspian regarding the increased activities of neighboring nations at their borders. Caspian replied, "Don't worry. They suffered heavy losses since our last battle. They haven't recovered their ability to fight yet. Keep an eye on them. If there is an emergency, report it to me immediately." He planned to resign from the company today and end what he had started. After many years of warfare at the border, Caspian found himself longing for the hustle and bustle of the city. In addition, the female CEO of the company had always been kind to him. Caspian had intended to lead a quiet life with Melanie, despite the pleasures available in the city. He, Melanie, and Bobby were all colleagues in the same company. Now that they had gotten a divorce, there was no reason to stay here any longer. With his status and wealth, he didn't need to toil away at the company. Caspian had just walked into the gates of the company when his colleague, Thomas Miller, approached him. "Hey, Caspian, weren't you on leave today? Why are you here now? Could it be?" He took a breath and raised his voice a few notches. "Could it be that you're here at noon just to save money? Are you going to freeload off the company for a free meal? You really know how to make ends meet. You work tirelessly every day and deliver parcels during lunch break. I'm sure you've already made a bomb, and yet you still need to save money on lunch." Thomas's remarks prompted laughter from the other colleagues around them. In this company, very few people respected Caspian. All of them felt ashamed to be associated with a deliveryman. Other employees working within the building complex often came by during breaks and asked, "Is this a courier company? Why do you hire deliverymen?" To them, sharing the same workplace with Caspian was considered a disgrace. As office workers, they were a cut above the blue-collar workers. None of them wanted to be associated with a poor deliveryman. They felt that Caspian's part-time job as a deliveryman had tarnished the image of the company. Whenever Caspian's colleagues saw him at the office, they mocked him. They hoped that he would resign. Today, they were finally getting their wish. Caspian went to his seat and started packing up his belongings. Even so, Thomas didn't miss a chance to ridicule him further. He asked, "Caspian, are you planning to resign? Did you finally accumulate a fortune by delivering parcels?" Thomas turned to the other colleagues and exclaimed, "Look, everyone, didn't I tell you? Even though delivering parcels is hard work and makes your body stink of sweat, it's a lucrative job. Look at Caspian. He's a prime example. Now that he has earned enough by being a deliveryman, he's going to resign. He'll finally join the ranks of the wealthiest people in Diatorin." Everyone burst into laughter when they heard Thomas's jeers. A deliveryman making it into Diatorin's list of the wealthiest people could be the funniest office joke of the year. Another colleague who loved to stir up trouble sauntered over to Caspian. He nodded to him with a mocking smile. "Mr. Lynch, I hope to learn from you in the future. Once you get your lucky break, don't forget about your old colleagues. If you have the time, reward me with a brand new bicycle so that I can follow in your footsteps. I will strive to get into Diatorin's list of the wealthiest people as well, and become one of the people who earns more than 350 million in the country." With that, Laughter rang out in the office. It sounded very lively. Employees from other companies couldn't help but glance when they walked by the door. They thought that Caspian's company was giving out year-end bonuses ahead of time. Caspian paid no mind to his colleagues' ridicule. He stared at the colleagues he had worked with for nearly a year, but he remained silent. He was Lord Caspian, ruler of Diatorin. Caspian wasn't upset as he allowed his colleagues, who were as insignificant as fleas, to mock him. There was no reason to lower himself to their level. It was beneath him to get angry with small fries. Caspian remained indifferent and focused on tidying up the belongings from his desk. He was prepared to resign and leave the company. At that moment, a loud slap was heard coming from the working area. It sounded like someone was smacking a folder down on the table. It wasn't very loud or piercing, but it was loud enough to silence the commotion at the work area. After that, a stylish and beautiful woman dressed in a black professional suit appeared. She wore a pair of black high heels, and her slender legs were covered in black silk stockings. Standing in the office area, she spoke coldly. "Are you all having a good time doing nothing? You seem to be chatting merrily. All of you will get a pay cut from this morning, except for Caspian. I will use this money to organize a party with food and drink for everyone in the office. Then, you can chat to your heart's content." Chapter 5. The CEO's encouragement. The woman chiding everyone at the work area was Willow Stewart. She was only 25 years old. She was beautiful and had a curvaceous figure. Even though she was dressed in a plain black suit, she exuded the aura of a professional model. Many men in the company often talked about her in private. Everyone hoped to have a girlfriend with such an attractive figure. However, their desires were limited to mere talk. Not only was Willow beautiful with a sexy body, but she was also the CEO of their company. When Willow reprimanded them, all the employees in the working area lowered their heads. They were cursing Caspian inwardly. If he hadn't returned to the company at this time, they wouldn't have wasted their entire morning at work. Willow swept a cold gaze around the office, and finally stopped on Caspian, who was still packing up his personal belongings. "Caspian, come with me to my office." Willow spoke sternly to Caspian. Coincidentally, he needed to tender his resignation to her as well. Caspian put down his belongings and followed Willow into the CEO's office. Her office was filled with a faint scent of roses. Willow invited him to take a seat. She started rummaging through her filing cabinet to look for some documents. Willow opened a drawer under the filing cabinet. She had to bend over to search inside the drawer, which was positioned too low. As Willow was doing so, she didn't notice that her skirt was riding up from bending over. Unintentionally, Caspian caught sight of her exposed thighs. His gaze wandered downward and lingered on Willow's slender legs that were clad in silk stockings. For a moment, Caspian's mouth went dry, and he felt a little thirsty. Just then, Willow stood up and poured a glass of water. She put it in front of Caspian. "Are you going to resign?" Willow asked, looking at Caspian. Caspian took a sip of water and nodded. When Willow entered the room earlier, she noticed Caspian packing up his belongings. She guessed that he was planning to leave the company. Caspian put himself in Willow's shoes. In her point of view, the reason for his resignation was likely due to the bullying and ridicule from his colleagues for the past year. "I'm not resigning because of those colleagues." Before Caspian could finish, Willow waved her hand and interrupted him. "What they said to you just now was inappropriate. Caspian, I can understand how you feel. However, you also need to know one thing. Life is about carving out your own path and letting others say what they want." She continued, "You don't need to care about anyone else's opinion of you. If you care too much about what others think, you'll end up living in their shadows. Eventually, you'll become like them." Caspian was taken aback. His CEO was usually aloof and distant. At this moment, she was actually encouraging him in person to strive for a better life. Of course, Caspian knew what Willow said made sense. Nonetheless, he wasn't resigning because of the bullying from his colleagues. He opened his mouth to explain, but Willow continued, "I know that Melanie is your wife. I also know that you're working very hard to provide for your family. Apart from your day job here, you even deliver parcels in this building during lunch break. she added, even though other colleagues outside don't understand. I appreciate a passionate young man like yourself. As someone just a few years older than you, I value your energy and zeal to work toward a better life. I also admire the contributions you've made to the company in your position. Willow leaned back in her chair. Before you tender your resignation, I need to let you know that I've decided to promote you to the position of project manager of the company. Your base monthly salary is $8,000, and a similar rate of commission as other managers. This isn't an easy position. I've observed all the employees in the company. I felt that only you can handle this role of project manager. I hope that you can stay with this company and achieve greater success in a higher position. She continued, with the increase in salary, your living standards will be greatly improved. You won't have to work so hard delivering packages. You can focus wholeheartedly on your day job. Most importantly, you can prove yourself using your abilities. Give those colleagues who had mocked you today a slap in the face. What do you think? After Willow said that, there was a faint smile on her lips. She was confident that after her heartfelt persuasion, Caspian would definitely stay on and work even harder for the company. However, Caspian rejected her. With a simple reply, he shattered Willow's confidence. Ms. Stewart, thank you for valuing me. I came to the company today for the sole purpose of tendering my resignation. Willow was dumbfounded. From her point of view, Caspian had no reason to refuse her offer. Nonetheless, Caspian not only refused her, but he did so without any hesitation. As Willow was about to ask Caspian for the reason, her phone rang. It was Alan Cooper. Willow took her phone and went out to answer the call. Caspian couldn't hear what the person on the phone was saying, but he could hear Willow's reply clearly. Mr. Cooper, please don't scare me. I've asked you many times before. You assured me that you would invest in this project. I've already put all my funds into this project too. Now that the project is halfway through, you changed your mind. Are you kidding me? I know that we didn't sign a contract for this project, but it was based on the trust we had between us. Cash flow is dwindling on my end. What am I supposed to do if you refuse to invest? Mr. Cooper, look here. Hello, Mr. Cooper, damn it. Willow's vision suddenly went black, and she stumbled. She lost her grip on the phone. It fell to the ground with a loud smash. Regaining her consciousness, Willow quickly picked up the phone again. Fortunately, it's just the tempered glass that is cracked. She fiddled with the screen and breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't that she cared about the phone. Willow was more worried that if she broke her phone, she wouldn't be able to contact Alan as soon as possible. Willow took a deep breath. She pushed open the door of her office and said, "Don't leave. Wait for me to come back." Staring after Willow's retreating figure, a thought formed in Caspian's mind. Yesterday, he overheard his colleague's conversation while sitting at his desk. The company took on a project previously, but they were having trouble with cash flow. That was why Willow had requested for Alan to invest in this project as well. Alan agreed immediately when he heard of this. However, both companies had not signed a financing contract for this project. Alan had used Willow's trust in him and tricked her into paying in advance for the project. He promised that his investment funds would arrive within the next day or two. Willow had bet her entire net worth on this project. When Alan saw that the project's cash flow was on the verge of collapsing, he decided to change his mind nonchalantly. There had to be something fishy going on. Caspian didn't need to think too hard to figure out what was going on. Alan was either after money, sex, or both. With this in mind, Caspian decided to help Willow. He wasn't doing it just because of her encouragement to him earlier, but he also wanted to help out for her sake. Based on his observation of her, Willow was an ambitious woman. She had the will and the ability to chase her goals. Moreover, investing millions or even hundreds of millions in a company wasn't a big deal for Caspian. When he thought of this, he ran out of the CEO's office and chased after Willow. However, Willow had already left in a car when he reached the entrance of the building complex. There was nothing he could do. Caspian went back inside to wait for her. When Caspian returned to the company, he was met with angry glares and resentment from his colleagues. They bombarded him with hateful remarks that grew louder and louder. "Hey, You've grown some guts. How dare you go to Emma Stewart and tattle on all of us? Now all of us have our salaries deducted. We were just joking around with you. How could you stab us behind our backs? That's right. We've been colleagues for nearly a year, and this is how you treat us. Even my pet dog, whom I've kept for a year, knows how to wag its tail when I pet him. You're worse than an animal. Caspian, you'd better listen to me. You have until the end of the day to reimburse my deducted salary this morning. If you fail, don't blame me for teaching you a lesson. Caspian, you sly, two-faced jerk. His colleagues were like fleas who didn't know their place. Caspian couldn't help but feel annoyed at the baseless accusations they hurled at him. He planned to discuss the investment matters with Willow after she returned later. In addition, he intended to become the largest shareholder in the company. Caspian wanted to see which of his colleagues would dare to find fault with him once he became the company's largest shareholder. Chapter 6: Baseless Accusations. Caspian sat at his desk and waited for Willow to return. He was also waiting to become the company's largest shareholder. Instead, Melanie and Bobby returned to the company before Willow did. As soon as Melanie entered the company, Thomas rushed up to her and said angrily, "Melanie, we've been waiting for you. Quick, return our money." "Damn it. Your husband is really a scumbag. He went behind our backs and reported us to Emma Stewart." He continued in anger. "Everyone in the company had a pay cut this morning. There's no place for negotiation. Return everyone's money right now." Thomas's heated rant left Melanie stunned at the entrance. After some time, she gathered what had happened in the office by her colleagues' accusations. Bewildered, Melanie stood at the entrance after getting shouted at by Thomas. She was furious as well. She had finally divorced Caspian, and yet this beggar was still embarrassing her at the company. In a fit of rage, she fished out the divorce certificate from her bag and held it up over her head. She announced to her colleagues at the office, "All of you, take a good look. Caspian and I are already divorced, and I have the divorce certificate on hand. From now on, we will go our separate ways. There's absolutely nothing between us anymore." Everyone immediately fell into stunned silence. No one expected to hear the sudden news of Melanie and Caspian's divorce. Thomas snatched the divorce certificate from Melanie and read it in a hurry. "Fuck. Have you two really divorced? You guys got divorced today." Melanie stuffed the divorce certificate back into her bag. Feeling aggrieved, tears streamed down her face. "You guys came to me for help after suffering injustice in the company. Who do I turn to when I feel wronged? When Caspian and I were married for the past 6 months, we lived in a rental house and wore cheap clothing. I never had the chance to have a meal at a restaurant. Every day, I had to endure the mockery of my colleagues because of Caspian's job as a delivery man in this building. I have no one to complain to regarding all these grievances." She continued, "Caspian even had to show off in front of me at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. He hired an actress and rented a knockoff car. He claimed that there was $1 billion inside the bank card he got me, and bragged that his car was worth $10 million. He even set a pile of fake luxury handbags and counterfeit cosmetics on fire in front of me. He pretended to be loaded and showed off in public as if he was some big shot. Who can I turn to air my grievances?" She turned to her colleagues. "In comparison, what you suffered just now was nothing. You guys only lost half a day's wages. On the other hand, my first marriage failed, and I lost 6 months of my youth. A woman's tears were a weapon that could move even hearts of stone, especially when it was from a beautiful woman like Melanie." Earlier, the colleagues from the office were still clamoring to receive compensation from Melanie. However, they were all worked up upon hearing Melanie's grievances. They were indignant and determined to seek justice for Melanie. Even though everyone clearly saw Melanie on Bobby's arm when they entered, that didn't deter them from seeking justice on her behalf. They directed their anger on Caspian once again. Thomas was the first one to rush over to Caspian. He pointed a finger at him and cursed, "Caspian, you're just garbage. Get out of our company. Your disgusting smell is ruining the environment here at the office. A beautiful woman like Melanie is wasted on you. You don't even know how to appreciate a wonderful woman like her." He continued, "Even after the divorce, you hired an actress to show off in front of your ex-wife. You even dared to claim that you have $1 billion in assets. Why don't you say that you're a billionaire's long-lost son? After Thomas was finished, other colleagues surrounded Caspian and bombarded him with insults. The office was filled with shouts of vulgarity. It was as if Caspian had committed an unforgivable crime. Caspian looked around, and his gaze landed on Bobby's smug expression. He had a gloating look on his one-eyed, pockmarked face. Caspian remarked, "You're all scolding me to suck up to Bobby, right? That's because his father is David Mason, the general manager of our company. Even when all of you knew that Melanie cheated on me with Bobby behind my back, you didn't dare to blame Bobby because of his father's influence. All of you are bullies who only pick on the weak. That's why I am being attacked mercilessly by everyone, with Thomas in the lead. Isn't that right?" Caspian's words pierced deeply into everyone's hearts. They raised their voices and rebuked him harshly. The louder their accusations, the more convinced they were in their self-proclaimed roles as arbiters of justice in the office. After some time, Bobby held out his hand for everyone to quieten down. The colleagues who had surrounded and accused Caspian fell silent. With a smirk, Bobby came over to Caspian with a triumphant look on his face. He went close to Caspian's ear and whispered arrogantly, "You're right. Thomas is my lackey. It was my idea to have our colleagues ostracize and target you repeatedly. I did this for one purpose, which was to win Melanie over." He continued, "I wanted to make her divorce a miserable delivery man like you. Take a look at yourself. Are you worthy of Melanie? A pathetic loser like you has no right to be with her. At this moment, you must be so furious that you want to punch me. Come on, go ahead, hit me." Taking a step back, Bobby pointed at Caspian and berated him mercilessly. "Caspian, my car is the top model BMW Z4 sports car. It costs tens of thousands of dollars. I don't care if you have to sell your assets or your kidneys. Whatever it takes, get me a new one, and we will consider this matter settled. Otherwise, I will report you to the police and escalate this problem. You might not even be able to get out of jail after 10 years. Thomas asked Melanie what happened to Bobby's sports car. Eventually, the other colleagues also knew about Bobby's BMW sports car getting crushed into a sheet of metal. Everyone started attacking Caspian verbally. Each of them was eager to get a word in as the accusations against Caspian grew stronger and stronger. Not long after, someone amongst the employees shouted, "Break it up, Ms. Stewart is back." Everyone dispersed and returned to their desks. They pretended to be busy at work, fingers clicking away at their keyboards. "If you don't get me a new car, get ready to be thrown in prison. Go on and show off, you loser." Bobby uttered a threat and returned to his own desk. Amidst all this, Melanie didn't look Caspian in the eye. She didn't dare to meet his gaze. She knew that her motive for being with Bobby was not because of love, but because he had more money. At the same time, she knew that Caspian was innocent. The accusations hurled by their colleagues were not true. Melanie knew better than anyone else that every penny Caspian earned was spent on her. What he received in return was betrayal. Melanie took the moral high ground and twisted the truth. As a result, she turned the tables on Caspian in public. Nonetheless, Melanie tried to console herself. "Melanie, you haven't done anything wrong. People are willing to die in the pursuit of money. It's not your fault for wanting a better life. Caspian, that poor loser, just can't measure up. He is facing the consequences of his own doing." Caspian glanced at Melanie, who had a conflicted expression on her face. Then, he looked at Bobby, who was staring daggers at him. Lastly, he swept his gaze at Thomas and other colleagues who looked proud of themselves. Caspian couldn't help but smile. He had led his soldiers of Diadem Hall to war at the borders, and fought for the protection of Diatoran's people. He never expected that among those whom he protected were a group of twisted individuals who corrupted the truth and looked down on the poor. When Caspian was reminded of his men who had died on the battlefield, an angry smirk appeared on his face. Initially, he hadn't planned on dealing with insignificant fleas like them, but they had become too bothersome to ignore. It was time to teach them a lesson. Before long, Willow walked to the CEO's office in her high heels. Caspian got up and followed after her. Thomas had a disdainful smile on his face. when Caspian walked past. "Hey, the loser is going to tattle to the boss again." Caspian reached out and grabbed onto the back of Thomas's head. With a loud thud, Thomas's face was slammed into the desk. Almost immediately, chaos erupted in the office. "Bastard, if you want to continue working here, prepare that report for me right now. Any later, I will make you work through the night until morning." With that, Caspian strode in the direction of Willow's office. The colleagues in the office were stunned. Was he the same person as the loser, Caspian, who had no guts to stand up for himself? At that moment, everyone had the feeling that Caspian had become a different person. Melanie considered herself to be the person who knew Caspian best. Even she realized that the Caspian she saw just now seemed inexplicably foreign to her. The previous Caspian she knew was a loser who was always drenched in sweat. He wore a dirty courier uniform that hadn't been washed for days. On the other hand, the Caspian at this moment exuded a commanding aura. With his menacing glare, he looked like a mighty general going to battle, fully suited up in shining armor. Chapter 7: Transfer the money and I will sleep with you. In the CEO's office, Willow leaned back in her executive chair. Her eyes were filled with tears of frustration. She was so furious about what had just happened. She had gone to Alan's office. However, he actually asked her to sleep with him in the lounge. Otherwise, he made it clear that his investment was off the table. Willow stormed out of the door. She would never allow herself to do such a thing. Throughout her career, she relied on her own abilities to build her business. Similarly, Willow felt regretful. Inwardly, she scolded herself for being so naive. During her negotiation with Alan, she failed to write the details of the contract in black and white. Now, she only had two options. She could either give in to Alan or watch her company go bankrupt because of a shortfall of $8 million. She would never choose the first option. However, was she really going to watch the company she had worked so hard to build go bankrupt? As Willow was in a dilemma with tears streaming down her face, there was a knock on her office door. Someone walked in. Willow wiped away her tears with the back of her hand and tried to compose herself. She suppressed her emotions and swiveled around to find that it was Caspian who walked in. Willow did her best to calm herself down and looked up at Caspian with a smile. "Mr. Lynch, have you made a decision? Can you start working today?" Caspian did not reply. When he saw the tears on Willow's long eyelashes, he reached for a tissue from the coffee table and handed it to her. Stunned, Willow took the tissue and wiped away her tears, feeling embarrassed. Caspian couldn't help feeling sorry for Willow. She had gone through a hard time, and now she had to put on a brave front before her employees. He comforted her, saying, although the world claims to uphold gender equality, women face more challenges in their careers as compared to men. Women are always tempted by honey traps in the face of financial interest. Miss Stewart, it is admirable that you have kept yourself pure until now. As Willow wiped away the tear stains on her face, she whispered, "You say that like you know all about it." Caspian shook his head. "I have no idea, but I could guess. Seeing as your eyes are so red, I must have hit the nail on the head." Willow looked up and forced a smile. "Even an employee like you could guess, but I failed to do that. How can I call myself a CEO of a company?" Caspian replied, "Don't underestimate yourself. You just temporarily lost your way in the face of enormous financial gain." Willow nodded in acknowledgement. Caspian's analysis was in line with her own thoughts. She spoke to Caspian, "Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" Caspian retorted without hesitation, "Shun, why should I have told you?" His unexpected response took Willow by surprise. Caspian was right. She only paid him a salary. There was no reason for him to tell her this. Willow thought for a moment and continued, "Then why are you telling me all this now? Are you trying to console me?" Caspian sat down across from Willow, nonchalantly. "Consoling you is just one of my aims. What I hope for is that my future business partner will not be blinded by profit and learn from this experience." Business partner. She only intended for Caspian to be her company's project manager. She was going to offer him a base salary plus project commissions. She wasn't going to offer him any of the company's shares. Caspian had his head down as he played with his phone. He spoke casually to Willow. My rough estimate is that the company needs another $8 million to complete the project. With your abilities, and an addition of $2 million for promotional funding, I'm sure this project will be a success. Willow was taken aback by Caspian's words. The budget that Caspian told her was nearly identical to her own private estimates. She had never discussed this with anyone, so how did Caspian know? Willow looked at him with suspicion. Caspian put his phone aside and stared into Willow's eyes. If I invest $12 million in the company, will you give me 51% of the company's shares? You will retain 49%. Miss Stewart, do you agree to these terms? Stunned, Willow jumped out of her chair and exclaimed, Are you kidding me? Caspian, are you here to mock me? $12 million is something you can come up with by mere talk. With your current salary, you couldn't earn that amount in a lifetime. Even if you worked 2 or 3 lifetimes, you wouldn't even be able to accumulate that sum. Caspian spoke calmly. It's only $12 million. To me, it's just a drop in the ocean. His indifferent demeanor infuriated Willow. She had never seen someone so arrogant. Willow had always thought of Caspian as a hard-working and humble young man. However, the words he was saying now completely contradicted the image she had of him. Merely $12 million. Caspian, let me ask you, with your day job and delivering parcels part-time, how much money can you earn in a month? Caspian finally understood. Willow must have thought he was bragging by the way he made light of $12 million. She was angered as she was struggling to make up for the enormous gap in cash flow. Nonetheless, Caspian had no intention to show off. As Lord Caspian of Diadem Hall, even if there were a few more zeros involved, he could afford it. To him, $12 million was pocket change. Sitting on the chair, Caspian spoke to Willow in earnest. Miss Stewart, I'm not joking. I will provide $12 million from my personal account. My condition is to exchange this $12 million for 51% of the company's shares. Are you willing? Willow scoffed and sat back down. She had always valued Caspian as a diligent employee. Little did she expect to find out after talking to him personally that Caspian was actually a maniac who loved D2. She regretted wasting her time and effort in promoting him to the position of project manager in the company. Luckily, Caspian had not accepted her offer. Otherwise, the company she built up through sweat and tears would be ruined by this braggart. Willow was feeling frustrated when Caspian asked again, Miss Stewart, have you thought it over? Willow was incensed. She picked up a folder next to her and slammed it onto the table. Caspian, that's enough. Please leave. I'm very busy and don't have time for your jokes. Caspian said helplessly, Ms. Stewart, I'm not joking with you. I'm being serious. Fine, let's talk business. You want to talk seriously, right? Willow took off her coat. She was wearing a tight-fitting pink blouse underneath that showed off her curves. Her voluptuous chest heaved up and down as she tried to suppress her anger. Willow opened her computer. She searched for the contract she prepared for Alan beforehand regarding their collaboration on the project. Her slender fingers flew across the keyboard as she made a few modifications to the contents of the document. In a few minutes, the printer nearby started printing. Soon enough, a complete equity transfer agreement was printed out. Willow took a pen and signed her name decisively on the agreement. She handed the agreement to Caspian. Here, once you transfer $12 million to the company's account, you will acquire 51% of the company's shares. In addition, I will add a supplementary term. If you fulfill the terms of this agreement, I will be your woman from now on. She pressed harder. Sign it now. Do you think I'm a naive girl who would be deceived by your tricks? After fooling around with me, you'll dump me like garbage. No problem. I'll play along with you. It's clearly stated in this contract. As long as $12 million of financing is transferred to the company's account by today, both the company and I will be yours. Caspian was taken aback. The financing amount and ratio of shares on the agreement were correct. However, Willow's offer of herself in exchange for a mere $12 million. Ms. Stewart, this is a little inappropriate. Willow's lips curved into a smile. She smirked with disdain. What's inappropriate about it? I don't have a boyfriend, and I'm still a virgin. You're getting the long end of the stick. Sign the agreement quickly. When you're done, transfer the money to the company's account. After that, we can check into a hotel. Otherwise, we can go to my place, or even yours. Don't waste time and sign the agreement. Since Willow was willing, Caspian didn't see a point in resisting further. He took up the pen and signed his name on the agreement, without hesitation. Then, he took out his phone. According to the account number on the agreement, he transferred $12 million into the company's account. Willow almost burst into laughter when she saw Caspian taking his act to such lengths. After that, he even spoke to her shamelessly. The transfer should be complete. Go and check the accounts. Willow chuckled coldly. All right, I'll play along with your charade. I'll go and check the company's account right now. Let's see if you have the ability to back up the boasts you've made. With that, Willow typed rapidly on the keyboard and logged into the company's financial accounts. When she entered the account's password and pressed to log in, she glanced at Caspian and sneered, "We'll head to a hotel later." Although Willow spoke casually, the moment she shifted her gaze onto the computer screen, she was dumbfounded. 4, 5, 6 zeros. There really was an addition of $12 million in the company's account. She immediately opened the transaction history. The sender of this $12 million was none other than Caspian. Chapter 8, There's No Need to Rush. Willow stared at Caspian in shock. She thought that Caspian was bragging in front of her. Even when she saw the $12 million deposited into the company's account, she couldn't believe that it was Caspian's doing. Willow opened the details of the transfer in the transaction records. There was no doubt that Caspian transferred the money. The timestamp of the transfer matched the moment when Caspian fiddled on his phone. Willow was curious about which bank could transfer such a huge amount to her company's account in an instant. It was unbelievable. However, Caspian was acting differently today. He kept making one surprising move after another, leaving Willow astonished. When he said he wanted to be a shareholder, he acted swiftly. Without any hesitation, he transferred the money, and it appeared immediately in the company's account. Was this decisive man the same Caspian that she had known before? Willow couldn't believe what was happening. She felt as if she was in a dream. It was time to wake up. Willow placed her hand on her thigh and pinched herself hard. She almost cried out in pain. The pain was vivid and real. This wasn't a dream. Everything happening before her was real. In a daze, Willow stared at the computer screen. She turned to face Caspian, who was sitting calmly across from her. She still couldn't believe it. Caspian, did you really transfer $12 million from your account? Caspian smiled when he saw the dumbstruck look on Willow's beautiful face. He had always thought that Willow was a standoffish female CEO with a stony expression on her face. This was the first time Caspian saw her adorable side. He said with a smile, "Do I need to deceive you for such a small amount of money?" "No, that's not what I meant." Flustered, Willow was at a loss for words. She didn't know whether she should sit or stand in front of Caspian. Willow uncrossed her legs and placed her hands neatly on her thighs. After all, Caspian's position in the company had changed in an instant. A moment ago, he was one of the company's employees and her subordinate. Right now, he was the largest shareholder of the company. Willow repositioned her hands on the desk after a minute. She felt that it was indecent to put her hands on her thighs, especially when she was wearing a skirt. Her gesture might cause Caspian to misunderstand, thinking she was doing something inappropriate with her hands under the table. Willow's cheeks turned crimson. She didn't know what to do or say at this moment. Looking at Caspian, Willow felt uneasy, as if she was on pins and needles. Caspian chuckled when he saw how flustered Willow was. Shaking his head, he coughed and came to Willow's rescue. "Willow, don't be concerned by what happened just now. Anyone sitting in your position would have thought that I was speaking nonsense. Let's consider it a thing of the past. In the future, we will continue working together as we have always been." When Willow heard Caspian's words, she was considerably relieved. She felt so embarrassed by her actions earlier. Caspian had offered to finance her company, and help her through the crisis. On the other hand, she had not shown gratitude and mocked Caspian for boasting instead. Willow was reminded of Alan, who had tried to bankrupt her company with his cunning tricks. She even considered him a close friend and an industry mentor. Thinking about it, it seemed absurd now. Willow tried to regain her composure and chuckled awkwardly. "I'm sorry, Caspian. I misunderstood you just now." Caspian waved it away. "Willow, there's no need to be so polite. Although I hold the majority of the company's shares, I will not interfere in the company's affairs, nor will I bring my own people into the office. On the surface, I may be the largest shareholder, but the decision-making of the company is still in your hands." He continued, "I'm only responsible for taking my share when the company profits, or covering my share if the company loses money. So, you should use the $12 million wisely, and don't let it go to waste." Caspian's words put Willow's mind at ease. If she had known earlier that Caspian would really invest $12 million into her company, she wouldn't have accepted his terms for 51% of the company's shares. Owning 51% of the company's shares meant that he had absolute control over the company. If Caspian did not know how to manage the company and mess things up, all the hard work Willow had put into it over the years would go up in smoke. His words gave reassurance to Willow. If Caspian did not interfere in the running and management of the company, Willow had the confidence to recoup Caspian's investment through dividends within 3 to 4 years. When she thought of how Caspian helped her settle the company's crisis, Willow felt a heavy burden lifted off her shoulders. An hour ago, she was crying in her office over the lack of $8 million in funds. Who could have expected that $12 million would appear out of thin air? After Willow came to her senses, her energy was renewed. She scrutinized Caspian's face, who had become her savior. The more she looked at him, the more she liked what she saw. Willow wished she could pin Caspian to the wall and give him a passionate kiss. She felt incredibly lucky to have encountered Caspian, her knight, who appeared out of nowhere. He had worked at her company for nearly a year, but she never realized that Caspian was so wealthy. Could it be that Caspian was a secret billionaire? Willow placed 2 copies of the agreement on her desk and quickly stamped them with her company's seal. She handed a copy to Caspian politely. When Willow went over her copy of the agreement again, her heart raced and her cheeks turned red. She noticed the supplementary term she had added to the bottom of the agreement. It read, "Once Caspian Lynch transferred an investment of $12 million to the company's account, I, Willow Stewart, am willing to be his woman. I will bear the consequences with no regrets." Willow had added this supplementary term earlier when she thought that Caspian was showing off in front of her. Out of anger, she wrote it down in the agreement. But now, $12 million were fully deposited into the company's account. Both of them had signed the agreement, and it was stamped with the company's seal. Theoretically, the agreement was valid and had taken effect. In that case, was she going to be Caspian's woman? Willow blushed at the thought of Caspian using this agreement to coerce her into going to a hotel. When she imagined him undressing her and engaging in intimate activities, her face turned crimson. Willow immediately regretted her impulsiveness. How could she add such an embarrassing clause to the agreement? Now that it had come to this, she basically shot herself in the foot. Blushing, Willow read the supplementary term in the agreement and turned to Caspian with an awkward expression. There was a hint of bashfulness in her attractive features. Caspian was flipping through the agreement as well. When he heard Willow's voice, he looked up. "What's wrong, Willow?" Her rosy cheeks grew even redder at his question. She stammered, "Regarding the supplementary term I added to the agreement, can we?" At this point, Willow's mind was in a jumbled mess. Stuttering, she tripped over her words in nervousness. Caspian turned to the last page of the agreement and read the supplementary term with a smile. "Willow, are you talking about the final term in the agreement?" Willow nodded quickly. "Yes, that's the one." Caspian nodded, and a mischievous smile appeared on his face. He said, "Willow, there's no need to rush. We have a lot of time. Didn't the agreement say that you're my woman from now on? We don't have to do it right now. Tonight would be fine." Willow's face turned purple with indignation. What did he mean by that? The way he worded it made it seem as if she was the one eager to sleep with him. No, you've misunderstood. I mean, is it possible if we remove the supplementary term before Willow could finish? Caspian stood up and walked over to her. He sized her up slowly from head to toe. He scrutinized Willow's beautiful face and curvaceous figure. Caspian bent down and whispered in Willow's ear, "Willow, you're truly a beauty. Not only do you have soft skin and an attractive face, your seductive body is captivating. Look at your blouse. It's too small to accommodate your voluptuous curves. In addition, your legs look extremely sexy, especially when clad in silk stockings." His warm breath tickled the sensitive skin near her ears. His suggestive words caused Willow to feel very shy, and her cheeks turned red with embarrassment. Inwardly, Willow felt both vexed and humiliated. She had thought that Caspian was an upright man and would not take advantage of a woman. She didn't expect him to be so shameless. He even dared to whisper such crude and lewd words in her ear to tease her. Willow found it hard to swallow. Willow planned to create some distance between them and renegotiate the supplementary term. Before she could finish her sentence, Caspian kissed her soft and cherry-red lips. It was Willow's first kiss. Willow wanted to push Caspian away, but the passionate kiss left her wanting more. When Willow watched romance movies in the past, she couldn't understand why there were so many kissing scenes. What was the big deal about exchanging saliva? What was the fuss all about? At the moment she was kissing Caspian, she finally understood. She felt like she was soaring through the skies in a beautiful dream. Willow squeezed her eyes shut and savored her kiss with Caspian. Chapter 9, Love Comes First. Willow was reluctant to offer her first time to Caspian so easily. However, she had already put it in black and white on the contract. She would be his from today onward. She wanted to pull away from him, but he held her with his muscular arms. Then, he went to the door and locked the CEO's office from the inside. "Caspian, please have some self-respect. You are a married man." Willow struggled in his arms. "Willow, no. Honey, I'm divorced as of today, believe me. Look at this." Caspian took out the divorce certificate he had just obtained that morning. He showed it to Willow. He continued with a playful grin. "We'll get our marriage certificates in a while and put the supplementary term into effect." After that, a creaking noise was heard coming from the sofa in the CEO's office. They pulled away from each other only after 2 hours. They dressed themselves and tidied up the sofa. It was then that Caspian realized this was her first time. Willow had always insisted on keeping herself chaste. But the moment Caspian carried her to the sofa, he felt like a different person. She didn't know why she would feel that way, but his temperament seemed completely different from before. Well, she had to keep her end of the deal. Now that she was his wife, she should be content with him as her husband. She added the supplementary term to the contract, and he fulfilled it. In that case, she would have to keep her promise. She had her own set of principles. Since she had had her first time with him, he would be her husband till the end of her days. Maybe this was destiny. Today happened to be her grandmother's 70th birthday. She would bring Caspian back to meet her family. Then, her family wouldn't force her to marry that wealthy good-for-nothing. Awkwardness filled the room. After they were neatly dressed, Willow lowered her eyes. She asked bashfully, "Caspian, can you tell me where you got the $12 million from? You've only worked for less than a year at this company. You even deliver parcels as a side hustle. Who would have thought you were so rich?" Caspian knew she was going to ask him about this. He couldn't just tell her that he was Lord Caspian of Diadem Hall. After all, she might not believe it even if he did. "So," he said, "will you believe me if I say I have way more money than this?" Willow pursed her lips. "I'm serious. You don't have to tell me if you're unwilling." Caspian didn't know what to say. He could only shrug. "Well, maybe I had a stroke of luck and won the lottery." She was stunned. Staring, she said, "Could it be? Last week, it was on the news that someone from South Lake City struck the first prize in the lottery. He won $15 million. You were that someone." He shook his head and smiled wryly. She didn't believe him when he told her the truth. But she accepted his lies instantly. Well, thinking about it, that happened with a reason. After all, striking the lottery brought more pleasure than the fact that he was wealthy. All right, honey, let's talk about that later. Aren't you going to announce my new identity to those people outside? Rising to her feet, Willow straightened her coat and skirt. Then, she handed him a wet tissue. Caspian couldn't understand her intention. Why did she abruptly give him a wet tissue? She noticed he was feeling curious, and her cheeks burned. Take a look at yourself in the mirror. There's lipstick on your face. Hurry up and wipe it off. What will the others think if they see that? Then, she unlocked the office door and went out. Caspian's gaze followed her alluring figure as she left. He couldn't help but feel joyful. He had a sudden thought. This must be a blessing in disguise. It was a very lovely blessing, indeed. In the office, everyone was gossiping in whispers even though they seemed busy. A heated discussion revolved around the same topic. Everyone was talking about the relationship between Caspian, Melanie, and Bobby. You know what I think? I'm sure Melanie dumped Caspian for Bobby. You guys saw it too, didn't you? Melanie and Bobby came to work arm in arm. Another said, that's for sure. Listen to me. Did none of you realize? Melanie has been using branded goods recently. She changed her attire, handbags, and cell phone. That loser, Caspian, can't afford all those. Did you notice? The cell phone she's using costs $2,000. Caspian won't be able to get one, even if he starves for 3 months. Someone else said, he deserves it. He's so broke. Why would he marry such a gorgeous woman like Melanie? He sure as hell can't afford her expenses. It's well known that beautiful women face more temptations in society. He's too poor for her. She just has to find herself a loaded man. Every word they said expressed how scornful they were of Caspian. Thomas was standing before a mirror. He hummed a tune as he wiped the blood trickling from his nose. He had his career all thought out. He'd accomplished the task Bobby assigned him. Bobby had also achieved his objective. He won over the beauty he had eyes for. After this, Bobby would surely put in a word or two for him before his father, David Mason. David was a manager. So, Thomas would have a bright future ahead of him in the company. Then, if he could win Willow's favor, he might just take over the company. As for Caspian, whatever. He was just a loser. It served him well to get dumped by his own wife. It was his fault for not being able to pay for Melanie's expenses. He thought he had absolutely nothing to do with their divorce. After all, there wouldn't be smoke without a fire. If their relationship was strong, how would Bobby come in between them? To him, Caspian deserved this ending. He deserved to be Thomas's stepping stone as he climbed the corporate ladder. Thomas fumed inwardly. I didn't expect him to have the guts to hit me, though. Fuck, I won't let it slide so. Just then, he heard the sound of a folder slapping against a table. Willow was the only person who would do that in the entire company. Every time she did that, everyone would pay attention to her. So, Thomas looked in its direction when he heard that familiar sound. To his surprise, Caspian was standing behind Willow. Why was that loser standing behind their gorgeous CEO? His wife had just cheated on him, yet he had the balls to be a snitch. Thomas wasn't the only one in the office with that thought. Everyone else, including Melanie and Bobby, thought the same thing. However, things took an unexpected turn. Willow swept her gaze across the room and stopped when her gaze fell on Caspian. I have an important announcement to make. From now onward, Caspian, or Mr. Lynch, will be the chairman of our company's board. Please give him a round of applause. When her speech ended, a deafening silence followed. It was so quiet that Willow could hear her own breathing. Everyone was in a trance. They gaped at Caspian, feeling like they were in a dream. She furrowed her dainty brows. No one clapped even though she prompted them to. That left her feeling awkward. Melanie was the most surprised of all. That was the loser she had just mercilessly dumped that morning. She needed to know how he became the company's board chairman after several hours. She wasn't the only one dumbstruck. Bobby, Thomas, and the rest of their colleagues were the same. Eventually, although everyone was still dumbfounded, Scattered claps followed after Willow started to clap. Soon, someone stood and clapped his heart away while smiling. He looked like he wouldn't stop until his hands were red and swollen. He said, "Welcome, Chairman. It's a pleasure for us to have you monitor our work. I've known from the start that Mr. Lynch is capable. He has been working with us to understand our work attitude. I can't believe I've guessed correctly. I wish you good fortune and success." Caspian still remembered this sweet talker. He demanded Caspian to pay him his docked pay not long ago. He even publicly threatened to take revenge if Caspian refused to compensate his full pay. Now, he initiated a thundering ovation from the others. Everyone beamed kindly at Caspian. Caspian was unfazed by the scene before him. He pointed at Thomas coldly. "Thomas Miller, come with me to my office. I'd like to know the progress of your report." Thomas shuddered. He looked like he just took a punch to his stomach. He had everything thought out. To him, Caspian was a loser. He had him wrapped around his finger. It never occurred to him he would become the chairman of the board. Then, Caspian announced, "Don't worry, I'll find time to listen to your reports one by one. Now, go get ready. You guys enjoyed talking through your hats. Huh? You'll get the chance to do so before me." Chapter 10. Swear on your life. Although Caspian was now the chairman, he didn't have an office. He turned to leave. As he brushed past Willow, he lowered his voice. "Honey, I need some help here. I don't have an office yet. What should I do?" He kept his voice low. Only the two of them knew what he said. However, he called her honey in public. So, her cheeks burned with embarrassment. Willow got wind of how Caspian had been verbally abused by his colleagues. They had not received their marriage certificates, but he was already her husband to her. It was natural to avenge her husband. Without hesitating, she pointed at her office. "Use mine for now. I'll make some space for you." He immediately declined. "No, that won't do. We have a deal. You're still the company's sole decision maker. How can I occupy your office?" "I think Mr. Mason's office will do just fine." Willow noticed something earlier. Melanie exchanged a surprised glance with Bobby when she heard Caspian had become the chairman. She could somehow guess why they divorced. Caspian mentioned he would like to occupy David's office. That confirmed her assumptions. "Sure," she said. "I'll come with you." Caspian smiled. He said in a honeyed tone, "Honey, they say there's a kind of woman who's 1 in a million. She's beautiful, has a good figure, and is wise beyond her age. And that's you, isn't it? You're the most brilliant woman I've ever met." Willow almost drowned in his flattery. She had many admirers. They would always praise her looks and ambitions. But he was straight out buttering her up. That was a first for her. Caspian had made up his mind. He wasn't in a rush to pick a fight with Bobby. It was a father's responsibility to teach his son. He wanted to confront David and ask him how he raised a homewrecker. When they neared David's office, they realized David wasn't in. He must have gone out to pull in sales. Thomas was trembling as he followed him from a distance. Caspian signaled to him with a wave. "Come here, Tommy. Pack Mr. Mason's stuff and move them out." Thomas was in a dilemma. He was Bobby's lackey. He was hoping for Bobby to put in a word for him before David in the future. But now, Caspian went so far as to instruct him to move David's stuff out, and to do that when David wasn't in the office too. If he did, he would rub David up the wrong way. If he didn't, he would offend their new chairman. At that moment, he wasn't sure what to choose. He looked pleadingly at Willow. "Miss Stewart, Mr. Mason's not in now. We don't have his permission to move his belongings out. We may misplace important contracts or documents if we proceed. I don't think that's appropriate." Willow agreed with him. She nodded. "You're right." Thomas heaved a long sigh of relief when he heard that. But before he could feel relieved, she continued, "Regarding this, I don't have a say. Mr. Lynch has the say now. We have to follow his instructions." Thomas gaped after she said that. Realization dawned on him. Willow and Caspian were on the same team now. They were fooling around with him. He turned to Caspian as he ran out of ideas. He looked torn. "Mr. Lynch, Where should I put Mr. Mason's belongings? Caspian didn't even look at him. He was fiddling with his phone. This is your task. Yet, you're asking me for a solution. If I ask you to print a contract, do I have to teach you how to use the printer? If I have to teach you step by step, what do I need you for? That loser, Caspian, was criticizing him to his face. He never thought there would be a day when this would happen. Still, he dared not say a word. He stood still, and his cheeks flushed. What if what he said offended Caspian? He would not only lose his job but also lose his quarterly bonus. Besides, it wasn't easy to find a job these days. At that thought, he awkwardly put on a flattering smile. He started moving David's belongings from his office. It took him several trips. Just as Thomas worked hard at his task, Caspian noticed Willow's expression. She looked like she had something to say. He asked, "Willow, do you have anything to say? Are you hesitating on how to put it because I'm now the chairman?" She looked at him, surprised. "How did you know?" He smiled. "It's written all over your face. How can I possibly not know?" Then, he pointed to the others in the office. They looked like they had ants in their pants. He said, "I know what you're thinking. Don't worry. Since I've invested in this company, I aim to profit from it. I won't dismiss everyone for personal reasons. I said those things to teach them a lesson. That's all. Who will do the work if I fire all of them? Besides, I know you have a soft heart beneath your stern and aloof character. Today, I'll just keep them on their toes on your behalf." Upon hearing that, Willow's slightly knitted brows relaxed. She suddenly felt that he seemed to understand her. No matter her concerns, he would always be the first to see through them. He now owned the majority of the shares, so she was worried he would interfere in the company's management. Now, she was worried he would act on his whims. He would disrupt the company's operation if he fired all the employees for personal reasons. Caspian read her thoughts. He frankly told her his opinion and gave her a satisfactory answer. She was secretly glad. It seemed they were highly compatible. She had found herself a suitable husband. After she returned to the CEO's office, Caspian entered David's office. Thomas had already cleared away David's belongings. He was sweating like a pig. Caspian eyed him and shook his head. People like him picked on the weak, yet feared the strong. He said, "Tommy, get me a glass of water. I'm so tired. I haven't had a sip the entire day." Thomas fumed when he heard that. He secretly cursed him. However, he still put on a respectful smile. "Sure, Mr. Lynch. I'll go and get you some water now. Please wait." Then, he turned to leave. Just then, he heard Caspian's voice from behind. "Tommy, you won't curse me behind my back because of something trivial like this, right?" Thomas immediately turned around. He quickly shook his head and denied it. "Of course I won't. Mr. Lynch, why would I do that? It's part of my job to get you some water." Caspian shook his head. "I don't believe you. You won't dare to scold me out loud, but I'm sure you're cursing me in your heart." Thomas was anxious. "No, I'm not, Mr. Lynch. I really am not cursing you." Caspian calmly nodded. He seemed to have believed Thomas. Right after, he said, "Okay, let's do it this way. Swear on your life now. You're a son of a bitch if you've done it." Thomas almost burst with anger. That was too much. Caspian Lynch. He thought angrily, "You made me clean up the office, and I did. You made me get you some water, and I agreed. But now, you're forcing me to swear on my life that I'm a son of a bitch if I curse you. You're going overboard, Caspian Lynch."